cute studio, cute lighting, cute camera. Fabulous. Hey
This episode is brought to you by Whoop. Whoop is the only wearable that turns your health and fitness data into personalized guidance. I've been wearing my Whoop for over 2 years now, and I can confidently say that the new model is an amazing upgrade. The new device is 7% smaller than the previous model, and the new battery lasts for 2 full weeks before you need to recharge. But those aren't even my favorite features. First, Whoop now tracks women's cycles with hormonal insights. We talk about our hormones all the time on Caps Lock, and we know how much they affect our health and wellness, not to mention our day-to-day experience of the world. This is huge. Second, the new Whoop includes a feature called Health Span, which tells you your physiological age and how your daily habits impact your pace of aging. Then gives you custom advice for slowing your pace of aging and ultimately lowering your Whoop age. And third, Whoop now offers heart health features, including on-demand blood pressure and ECG readings, so you can check in on your heart anytime and share results with your healthcare provider. This is important for everyone, but especially as my loved ones start to get older, I've gotten them all on the new Whoop because it could literally be a lifesaver. You know how I feel about my health, proactive and preventative. And the new Whoop is my #1 teammate in wellness. Join now at join.whoop.com/Samantha Fair. That's join.whoop.com/Samantha Fair.
guys, it's Sam, and welcome to Caps Lock, a podcast designed to help you live bigger, better, louder, and longer. Before we get started, I just want to thank you guys for listening and for giving this a chance and for coming here in pursuit of your best self. This is a space where we are going to grow together, and my hope is that it helps you go forward confidently, unapologetically, and with purpose. It's time to live your life in Caps Lock. If that mission feels aligned for you, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and let's dive in. Guys, we're in a new studio today. This is like a fun little surprise. I'm staring at myself in the television as I'm saying this, so if you're watching, I'm just checking myself out. It's really nice. It's really spacious. I love it. Maybe I'll do this more. Let's do our chatty life updates that we're loving so much. The first thing I want to talk about is the New York Times just published an article saying that Gallup recently reported only 54% of U.S. adults self-reported consuming alcohol. Now, I do want to flag, obviously, self-reporting, especially with substance use, usually comes out a little bit lower than usual. However, this is a record low number in Gallup's 90 years of collecting data on alcohol consumption. And even if self-reporting comes out a little bit lower, the fact that this is the lowest self-reported amount does indicate an overall decline in alcohol consumption in adults. So I think that's really cool. As you guys know, I'm like kind of anti-alcohol now. This also comes after the number of alcohol-related deaths in the U.S. more than doubled among Americans between 1999 and 2020. That's crazy, guys. The number of alcohol-related deaths more than doubled in 21 years. That's terrifying, but cool that fewer adults are drinking and more adults are getting into sober curiosity or sobriety. Love that for them. Also, personal life update. As of today, the renovation is done. Very happy to say that. We are now in the stage, like currently while I'm sitting here, the cabinet guys are finishing up the cabinets and the drawer pulleys and the cabinet knobs and all that. So now we're in the stage of getting the last of my boyfriend's stuff in. And then we have to do some like decor stuff. We're going to do curtains. I need to replace the doorknobs. I don't know if I ever told this story, but when I moved into my apartment, when I first toured it, they were like, the doorknobs are not included. And I was like, sorry, what? And it turns out the lady who owned the apartment for me had like these beautiful, expensive antique doorknobs. And they were like, yeah, she's taking all of them. So you need to buy doorknobs. And I was like, okay. And they were like, how's a credit of like $100 per doorknob? And I was like, that sounds like a lot. That sounds great. No, I made a huge mistake. I was like, yeah, that's perfect. Turns out really nice doorknobs are like $125 a pop. No one warned me. So it's cool. Anyway, and then we're going to hang some art and do a little housewarming. And the bit is that I was always planning to do a housewarming when I moved into the apartment. I was like, oh my God, I'll have all my friends over. We'll have a little girly housewarming. And now we're literally not even getting to the housewarming until my boyfriend fully lives in it because of how long this renovation has taken. So we are having housewarming, not I am having housewarming. So that's fun. 5K training is going great for everyone who's been following along. I've been like vlogging my little training runs. Currently, I've been running 2 times per week because I have never run consistently before. And so it's new for me. But I think I'm going to up it to 3 times per week now because it's not that big a lift. I mean, the runs are short, right? They're anywhere between like 1 and 3.5 miles long because I'm only training for 5K. So I can definitely run more, and therefore I'm going to. So stay tuned. I've been posting all online and coming soon to YouTube. I will be talking about where this all came from, my training program, like what's the 0 to 5K process for me as someone who has like never run before and always hated running. And if it keeps going well, maybe we'll do longer races. I don't know. People always say running's addicting, and I never believed them until I started. And now I'm like, it is. Here we are. So loving that. Before this episode starts, I have one request of all of you guys because I love you and I love our little family here. I would love if you would leave a rating or review for the pod. Every time I ask, I get a couple and I really appreciate it. It's easy to forget in between to do it, but it literally takes less than 10 seconds if you just leave a star rating and less than 30 seconds if you leave a little written review. Either way, I totally appreciate you. It really makes a big difference for me to get feedback on the pod to see what you guys are liking, if you're liking it at all. And it's really good for us because if advertisers see that you guys come back and listen and like it, we can afford to keep making the podcast. So please leave a rating or review. Feel free to do that right now because you love me. Anyway, let's talk about our episode for today. We are talking about creatine. I recently bought some based on a recommendation from a friend. I texted her and I was like, "You look amazing." She had just had a baby. And I was like, "Wait a sec. Where'd the baby come from? I don't get it." And she was like, "I've been taking creatine and really loving it. And I feel so strong." And I was like, "That's so interesting. Maybe I should start." Mostly, honestly, because she said she felt strong and she had had a baby very recently. And it is totally a journey, as we know from my episode with my friend Taylor a few weeks ago. Totally a journey to feel strong again after having a baby in your postpartum era. And my friend who I spoke to about the creatine said it really helped her. And so I was like, huh, maybe I'll look into it. I did buy one before doing a ton of research. Like, I looked at the ingredients and looked up, like, what are the cleanest ones and just, like, picked one, which is kinda silly and off-brand for me, but I was just, like, feeling crazy. And, yeah, my version of crazy at this ripe old age of 28 is buying creatine without doing a full 60-minute podcast episode on it, so that will tell you what my life is like right now. I just started, so I haven't seen any results yet. I literally started taking it today. But obviously, I wanted to do my classic deep dive, learn everything you possibly can about it. And that's what brings us here today. I quickly learned upon looking into creatine that it is the most studied and researched supplement in sports medicine, basically, at least one of. There are upwards of 1,000 studies just on the effects of creatine. This is amazing because supplements are not they're not reviewed for safety and efficacy by the FDA. It is really hard to do any sort of controlled study on supplements just because all different brands use all different ingredients. It's really hard to regulate. It's really hard to find consistency. So the fact that creatine is so well researched is actually really sick. And that brings me to the question, like, why don't we as women know more about it and talk more about it? I feel like we should. So I'm here to accomplish that mission. So let's talk about creatine, what it is, what it does, who should use it, how they should use it, health implications. You know the drill. We're going to do the full Monty. So let's start with the basics. What is creatine? And if I'm not making eye contact with you for a lot of the rest of this episode, it's because I'm reading a lot of research, okay? Creatine is actually a compound that your body makes naturally by way of 3 different amino acids in your body: glycine, arginine, methionine. I did not look up how to pronounce these words, so I'm sorry if I'm getting wrong. But these 3 amino acids work together to make creatine naturally in your body. It is mostly produced in the liver, the kidneys, and your pancreas. And then after your body makes it, it stores it in your skeletal muscles. Now, I wanna do a sidebar a second so that we can talk about your skeletal muscles. I sometimes get asked if skeletal muscles are a specific type of muscle or if it's just another word for your muscles, which seems like one big group. But actually, to answer that question, there are three different types of muscles in your body. Two types of muscles that are involuntary, meaning they just work and you don't have to control them with your brain voluntarily. And then one type of muscles that is voluntary. And that type the voluntary type of muscle is your skeletal muscles. And basically, your skeletal muscles attach to your bones and they allow you to make voluntary movements. So like anytime you move your hands or stand up or go for a walk or like literally anything that you consciously do with your body, that is by way of your skeletal muscles. And then the two types of involuntary muscles are your cardiac muscles. And obviously, those work to pump your blood throughout your body. And then the third type that is also involuntary is called smooth muscles. And that helps with the involuntary movements of other organs. So, anyway, after your amino acids make the creatine in your body, it's stored in your skeletal muscles. And then there's also a small percent of the creatine that's stored in your brain, like literally less than 5%. And in men, there is a small fraction of a percent that's also stored in the testes. We don't have those, so we don't really care. While the creatine is in your skeletal muscles, it is stored as phosphocreatine. And its function there is to basically regenerate triphosphate, which we're going to call ATP because I always stumble over that word. And we know about ATP because your body uses it to power muscle contractions or any sort of movement like walking, lifting, raising your hand, talking, any of that. And we talk about ATP here and there in a bunch of different episodes. I said a couple weeks ago, we're not afraid of carbs, we're not afraid of sugar because those go into your muscles and help you with ATP production. Same thing here. Your creatine is helping regenerate ATP as your muscles use it to make voluntary movements. In other words, simple terms, it's an energy reserve that your skeletal muscles can access quickly. Again, you might remember this from previous episodes where we've talked about it a bunch, but when you're doing short bursts of intense exercise, so think about sprints, hit workouts, weightlifting, that kind of stuff, your body goes through ATP quickly. And as your ATP depletes, your muscles are using the phosphocreatine stored in your skeletal muscles to replenish it on like a tight turnaround. In total, your body makes about 1 to 2 grams of creatine per day naturally using these amino acids. And the total recommended amount for creatine for most healthy adults is actually only 3 to 5 grams or about zero point 0.1 grams per kilo of body mass per day. So, for example, I weigh 115 pounds. And when I converted that to kilos and like did the math, whatever, it basically says for me as a healthy adult human, I should be having 5 grams of creatine per day. So if my body makes somewhere up to like 2 grams of creatine per day, I should be getting additional creatine. Now, to be clear, this number of grams per day that I'm saying right now, where it's like I should be having 5 grams of creatine per day, that is not if I have a goal of like building additional muscle or like extreme intense improved athletic performance. That is just like the general amount that a human should be having or getting to be alive in the world. So you might be wondering where we get those extra 2 to 4 grams of creatine from. And the good news is that most of us actually just get it from our diets. That is from like an omnivorous diet, like a normal adult who eats plants, meat, all the things. Now, the creatine that we get in our diets does come exclusively from animal products. There is no source of plant creatine in the world. Like plants do not have creatine. It has to come from an animal source if you're getting it naturally from foods in your diet. So this is a great time if you have a plant-based friend who's into fitness. I do strongly encourage you to send them this episode because we are going to talk about creatine supplementation and creatine supplements. I'll talk a little bit later about what exactly they're made of, like particularly the powdered kind, which is mostly what this episode focuses on because creatine supplements, a lot of them are actually vegan. It's just your plant-based friend is not getting creatine supplementation from their diet at all if they don't eat any animal-based products. So send this right now to a plant-based friend who's into fitness. This is a good opportunity for them to especially if they're interested in, like, building muscle mass, uh, toning, or doing body recomposition, that kind of thing. This could be a really good episode for them. Anyway, some creatine-rich foods include poultry, meat, and fish, and it seems there's also some creatine in dairy and eggs, not as much, obviously, as if you're just eating meat, but again, all of those are animal products, and while, yes, the 1 to 2 grams of creatine that our bodies produce naturally is enough, totally enough to be fine, if we want to achieve optimal physical performance and body composition, the recommended amount of creatine is, in fact, higher. So, no, your vegan friend is not gonna like die because they're not getting creatine from red meat. But now that we know what creatine is, how the body makes it and otherwise obtains it, how the body uses it, let's get into creatine supplements. Most creatine supplements are available in the form of powders, gummies, capsules. You might see it in blends where it's mixed in with like pre workout or protein powder, that kind of thing. But it is generally agreed upon that powder is the best way to take it because all the other formats either tend to have smaller doses of creatine or there are like some absorption barriers. For example, when you hear about people taking supplements in the form of capsules, you'll hear a lot that they contain filler. And basically, that filler is just inactive ingredients that make the product either smell better, taste better, look better. But it also means that you're getting less of the actual supplement that you wanted when you bought the product. And therefore, you might have to take more of them in order to get the dose that you're aiming for. Or also, sometimes those fillers do affect the amount of it that your body absorbs. So even if you're getting technically ingesting the amount of creatine that you want, you might also absorb less than that. So you might think you're taking X amount, but your body's really only benefiting from a smaller amount. You know what I mean? Anyway, with powders, you absorb the product better and you also have a lot more control over your dosage, particularly if you're trying to adjust your dosage, like you're taking a little bit and you're like, okay, I want to go up. You know exactly how much you're going up by. So, for the remainder of the episode, we are mostly going to talk about creatine supplements in the powder form because that is the recommended way to take it. Now, I read a couple different supplement brands' websites to get the following information about how they actually make the creatine powder supplements. I will say not a ton of brands share this information publicly. And the reason for that is probably, and this is just like my conjecture, it seems that almost all creatine on the market is manufactured outside the country. It seems there might be like 1 or 2 brands that manufacture within the US. Almost all creatine on the market is actually made in China, and then it seems that like 1 or 2 brands do manufacture in Germany, but literally like 99% of the stuff is made in China due to low labor and production costs, and as a result, probably not all of the supplement brands actually know exactly how like, the details of how their product is made, which is a little sketchy. Now, sidebar, I do wanna quickly say that it's racist to assume that something is bad because it's made in China, and what's more important than where the product comes from is actually just the transparency on the quality of the product. So, like, these companies should all be doing independent third-party testing, they should be pursuing seals and badges from reputable third-party agencies so that you can tell that this product has been reviewed by someone who does not benefit from the product being good quality, and so they're not cheating, they're not cutting corners, and just because something is made in China, it's not a bad thing. We are just looking for the brands themselves who get the product from China to do the independent third-party testing so that we know what we're putting in our bodies, regardless of where it's from, whether it's from Germany, China, who cares where. Anyway, on the few supplement brands' websites that actually do share the process of how they make their creatine supplements, the process seems to be pretty much the same across the board. And I'm actually just going to read it because I want to make sure I get it right. Although I will say I've been doing a really good job of making eye contact with you guys during this episode and not just like reading off my computer. So I'm really proud of that. Anyway, seems like the process is as follows. Sodium sarcosinate and cyanamide are put into a reactor and heated slash pressurized to form a liquid. Then the liquid is cooled to form crystalline creatine, so literally crystals, and put through a centrifuge, spinny thing, to remove any impurities. The crystals are then vacuum dried and then they're milled or like ground up into a very fine powder so that the powder can dissolve better in liquids. After the testing, then the creatine is ready for use. And since we are ingredient girly pops, I obviously checked out sodium sarcosinate and cyanamide, not to be confused with cyanide. So here's what the heck those things are. Sodium sarcosinate is found in a lot of skincare, hair care, oral care, household cleaning products, and all of that sounds very scary, but it's actually considered safe to use in products on sensitive subjects, including babies. Like it's in a lot of like baby shampoos, and it seems to be rated very low toxicity for ingesting in small amounts, as in the case of toothpaste. Like if you have a little toothpaste in your mouth or you swallow a little toothpaste, you're gonna be fine, right? It is known to have both cleansing and foaming properties. For example, that's why it works in shampoos and toothpastes. So that's that. And then cyanamide, again, not to be confused with cyanide, but it is actually cited online as being, quote, similar to cyanide, but not as toxic. I don't know what that means. And I don't like it off the bat. And also by itself, cyanamide is a reactive chemical and an explosion hazard. And it can also irritate the eyes, skin, etc., and can cause burns on contact. So obviously, like after doing that research, I have follow-up questions. The main one being, why is creatine literally FDA approved if this stuff sounds like poison? Well, to answer your question, Sam, it seems that the chemical processes transform the qualities of these ingredients so that by the time they get into the creatine, they're no longer in their original hazardous forms. And then they go through that purification process, which basically removes any leftover unwanted byproducts that could be considered irritants for ingestion or otherwise. And this is why, ladies and friends, that it is important not just to read the ingredients on your label, but to also educate yourself on the process by which the chemicals undergo any kind of transformation. Because, yeah, those ingredients by themselves sound scary, but then once you get to the actual product of creatine, not scary, not dangerous. And that is because they go through all these processes that transform the basic qualities of the chemicals. And yes, if you heard me correctly a minute ago, I do want to share that creatine itself is FDA approved. Now, the caveat being, of course, I mentioned already, the FDA does not approve dietary supplements at all for either safety or efficacy. So the responsibility is actually entirely on the manufacturers and on the supplement brands to ensure the quality of their products. That is why they do their own purification processes and then do their own testing as well as third-party testing so that we all know the product is Gucci. So when you're buying creatine, important note here, just make sure you're buying from a brand that does independent testing and has transparency about that on their website and or on their products. Whether that's like test results, again, badges and seals from reputable testing agencies. And if you're like not sure if a company does that, they probably don't, because if they do that, they're advertising it. They're proud of it. They want you to know, hey, independent agencies tested this product and it's good for you. Okay, so that's good. Speaking of buying creatine supplements, there are many types of creatine, and it seems that the six most popular types are monohydrate, ethyl ester, hydrochloride, buffered creatine, liquid creatine, and magnesium chelate. I don't know if I pronounced that word right, but I'm not going to go into detail about all of them because it would extend the episode by too much. And basically, these are just the most popular types because some people claim, oh, like this one absorbs better. This one makes you perform better. This one reduces the risk of like your stomach getting upset from it, that kind of stuff. But again, I'm not going to go into detail on this because creatine is, again, one of the most heavily researched supplements in the world. And the consensus amongst most medical professionals, according to the research that's peer reviewed and available, is that creatine monohydrate is just the best type. And there are essentially no proven advantages to using a different type of creatine over the powdered creatine monohydrate. So let's talk about creatine monohydrate. It's made of a creatine molecule and a water molecule. And I guess if you weigh out a serving, the serving is about 90% pure creatine by weight, but, like, that doesn't really matter for us. There should be serving information on your product when you buy it so you know exactly how much creatine you're getting as well as the recommended dose. I wouldn't worry about that too much. So let's move on into the more important stuff, which is the reasons you might wanna take creatine supplements, and they are as follows. Creatine supplements may improve strength, increase muscle size, and improve athletic performance, particularly in high intensity athletic endeavors that require a fast recovery and exertion turnaround. So, like, again, a hit workout, a sprint, a weightlifting thing, something where you are blowing through your ATP and your body could really use more of it really fast. As such, creatine may also hasten recovery after a strenuous physical activity. It may also reduce muscle dehydration, cramping, and injury. It may improve cognitive function and brain health, particularly in adults over the age of 60. More research here is needed to deduce the exact mechanisms by which this happens and if it is, in fact, universally true. Obviously, very few things are universally true, but I guess what I mean by that is we just need to do more research to make sure that it is causation, that it is happening for a wide variety of people. But it does seem there's a growing body of evidence that creatine is good, not just for you physically, but also mentally above the age of 60. So we love that. Creatine may also help you maintain and even improve bone density as you age, which we know as listeners of Caps Lock is super important for longevity. We talked about this with Dr. Jessica Shepard in the episode about your hormones for all the different ages. And we talked about menopause and we talked about living a long and healthy life as women as we get older. And she was saying skeletal muscle mass is a huge part of that, but so is bone density. And creatine actually helps with both of those things. And so, you know, A to B, B to C, if we go A to C, it seems that taking creatine in theory could help your longevity because it is helping you build skeletal muscle mass and protect your bone density. So that's pretty cool. Again, research validating creatine's effect on cognitive function is more limited. And let's be real, most of us are not here for that particular information. So I want to take this opportunity to double click on the potential physical benefits of using creatine. We already talked about how it could make you stronger, it could make you like grow your muscles, but let's go a little bit deeper. Something I think is important here is that a lot of people will anecdotally say to you, like, oh, creatine helps me get shredded. And I will say that that's something that I was initially interested in when I bought my creatine. I texted my friend, I was like, you had a baby 2 minutes ago, and I can see your six pack. What's going on here? And for clarity, when I say shredded, I basically mean losing fat and gaining muscle to achieve a look that people frequently will call toned. But as we know, we can't tone a muscle. What I'm saying is you can't convert fat into muscle. Toned is when you lower your body fat and increase your muscle mass, and therefore you're better able to see the definition of your muscles through the skin on your body from the outside. And I also want to be clear here that creatine does not directly burn fat or build muscle. However, since creatine may boost your athletic performance by doing what we said a minute ago, giving you energy, helping you recover faster, reducing risk of dehydration, muscle injury, that kind of stuff, it is shown in numerous studies that creatine can aid you in the process of building strength and muscle. And what do we know about muscle? The higher your muscle mass is, the more calories you burn at a resting state and in an active state. So you do the math. I'm not saying creatine is going to help you burn fat and build muscle. I am going to say that creatine is potentially going to create circumstances under which you can better burn fat or increase muscle by way of activity, right? And so again, it's kind of A to B, B to C. Creatine does this, and this might give you a better environment for burning fat and building muscle. Now, I want to spend a few minutes responding to some commonly asked questions about creatine, which very conveniently are asked and answered directly in this sports nutrition study published in the National Library of Medicine in 2021. This study posed 12 specific commonly asked questions and asked a bunch of trusted medical professionals to basically do a meta-analysis of the hundreds of peer-reviewed and published studies on the matter to synthesize the results and make science-backed recommendations and responses to these questions. I'm not gonna go through all of them. I don't think all 12 are necessarily questions that we're sitting here asking ourselves in our head, but I did pick out the ones that I thought applied best to the caps lock audience. So I'm gonna summarize them here. The first question I thought was helpful for us is, does creatine lead to water retention? Because something that I hear a lot from women who want to start using creatine is they do want to achieve that toned look. They're trying to burn fat, build muscle, and they start freaking out when they start taking creatine because they're like, wait, I think I'm getting bloated. I think I'm gaining water weight. Like, I think I'm holding on to water. And here's the tea based on a bunch of different medical professionals, meta analysis of hundreds of studies on the product. Essentially, the available body of evidence shows that while you might retain a little bit more water than usual for up to 7 days after starting to take creatine, you are unlikely to retain a higher than usual amount of water after that. And if you do, it's not necessarily a result of your creatine intake. It might be caused by other factors. So, in short, it's possible that for the first few days of taking creatine, you retain a little bit of extra water. But no, in the long term, you are not retaining water from taking creatine. And if you are, it's more likely that it's from other things. So examine other parts of your lifestyle. Number two, does creatine overload your kidneys, cause kidney damage, renal dysfunction? This response was kinda hilarious for a legit medical journal because basically they were like, "Hey, yeah, we have no idea where this widespread and pervasive misinformation comes from, but no, creatine doesn't cause kidney damage or renal dysfunction." Basically, there was a case study performed in 1998, and all these scientists were like, That is probably the origin of this widespread concern," but it kinda snowballed out of control because in that case study in 1998, there was literally only one test subject in that whole case study, and it was a person who literally already had kidney disease. Like, they studied someone who had kidney disease for 8 years, and it was getting worse, and they were like, "Oh, it's probably getting worse because he started taking creatine." Mm, or they've had kidney disease for 8 years, and it is not getting better. Literally every other study conducted since then has been like, "No, your kidneys are fine." And again, if they're not, it's probably not because you're taking creatine. So that's that on that. The third question posed was, does creatine cause hair loss or baldness? Again, the current body of evidence says no. And this concern gained traction after another singular study. And the results of that study came out in 2009 and have literally never been replicated again. So, no, creatine is not causing hair loss or baldness. There are three more that I wanted to pull out. Does creatine increase fat mass? No. No, it doesn't. This has actually been tested on a variety of different populations and subject types, male, female, different ages, different levels of physical activity. And while your total body mass might change from supplementing creatine as a result of muscle mass changes and, like, for a limited time, that water retention, your fat mass remains totally unaffected. Like, they studied the actual composition of these people's bodies. They were like, are they gaining fat in their bodies from taking creatine? The answer was no. So if you feel bigger, it's likely the result of gained muscle mass, not fat mass, and or if it's like in the first couple days and you're like, there's no way I gained muscle yet, you might be retaining a little bit of water, but again, that should stop after the first couple days. Don't forget also that as soon as we start trying to do body recomposition, we all get body dysmorphia. That is like such a common thing. You're like, oh, I'm hitting the gym. Suddenly you're examining your body a lot more and you're suddenly working toward a goal that you feel you haven't reached yet. So you have a different psychological approach to looking at your body. So it's also possible, by the way, you have not increased mass at all. You're just looking at yourself differently. So unless you're doing body composition scans that are reliable and not like gimmicky, unless you're doing that, it's possible you also haven't changed at all, you're just looking at yourself differently. Just consider that. But basically, consensus is creatine does not make you gain or maintain fat. Another question that we hear a lot is a creatine loading phase required? And I found this really interesting. The concept of creatine loading basically means when you first start taking creatine, you take a lot, like more than the average dose, and you do that for a little bit, and then afterwards you go to kind of a maintenance dose, which is a more normal dose for your day to day. So creatine loading, it looks like over the first few days of taking it, you'll take it like 20 to 25 grams of it, which is a lot. Because remember, I told you most of us are naturally making 2 grams and eating like 2 or 3 more grams. So if you're creatine loading, you're taking 20 to 25 grams for around the first week. And then after that, you switch to your maintenance dose, which is a more typical serving size of 3 to 5 grams per day. And then some people say in order to get the maximum potential out of your creatine supplementation, you need to do this loading phase in the beginning. So they studied it, they checked it out. Basically, the available body of evidence shows that indeed, people who consumed 20 grams of creatine per day for 6 days showed the same accumulation of creatine in their muscles as people who consumed 3 grams per day for 28 days. So that's like basically 1 week versus 4 weeks. They showed the same amount of accumulation of creatine in their muscles. So if you wanted to see the same muscle saturation levels as the people who are loading, it'll take a normal person supplementing with a normal dose about 4 weeks. Now, it is important to note this doesn't mean that people see results within 6 days of taking their creatine versus 4 weeks. It just means that the creatine saturated their muscles at that speed. So, the loading group experienced some of the benefits faster, like increased power during the workouts, for example, but they didn't build any notable amount of muscle in 6 days. That's, like, kind of impossible. And it's also worth noting that the people who do creatine loading might experience more water retention in those early days and or gastrointestinal upset due to the increased dose because basically the only risk of taking that much creatine is like your body's not used to it. It might make your stomach upset. That's kind of just the tea. So basically it's up to personal preference whether you do front load creatine or you just start taking a normal dose, but it is like neither one is unilaterally better or worse. The advice is if you do decide to load, it seems safest based on the research to do smaller doses of like 5 to 10 gram servings spread out throughout the day. Like, don't do one shake or one smoothie or one drink where you take all 20 grams of that creatine at once because a full going like 0 to 20 grams is a huge lift and it can really upset your stomach. So, if you want to front load and you're not really worried about like the couple days of water retention, whatever, feel free. But I would do like 3 or 4 servings of creatine to equal 20 to 25 grams instead of just doing the full 20. And then the last question that I think is probably the biggest one for this particular audience, and so I, like, cared about this one the most. This is a big question that we hear a lot. Is creatine also effective for women, or is it really just effective for men? The answer here is no, it's not just effective for men. It is also effective for women. We come up against the same problem over and over in medical research, which is that women's bodies are just not as studied. We use male test subjects all the time. We are almost never like immediately jumping to like, hey, can we do this for women? I use the seatbelt example all the time. We didn't start testing seatbelts on women until like recently. That's fucked up. We do not have the same bodies as men. We are not just smaller versions of male anatomy. We have completely different systems. And therefore, everything that's tested on men and then like recommended to the general populace, we can't, as women, just trust that that's going to work for us. We have to find out for ourselves. And that's really hard because not all of this medical research is even considering female biology. I always rant about that when it comes up because it really pisses me off. But anyway, since we are making leaps and bounds in this day and age, women are being studied a lot more lately, and there is a quickly growing body of evidence pointing toward creatine being great for women. And that's awesome. Seems to have a lot of the same benefits as the ones men experience, but also it's potentially a huge help during menstruation, prenatal, pregnancy, postpartum, and more. That's really cool. To be clear, there is not a lot of research, if any, conducted on creatine during pregnancy in humans. This research is extrapolated from animal testing and also from human testing during non pregnancy. So I'm not recommending anything. And while the existing evidence points toward the suggestion that creatine supplementation could help reduce risks for your unborn baby. Like it says, it might reduce risk of preemie, might reduce risk of like brain issues or like other development issues. It is 100% essential, crucial, mandatory, if you ask me, to consult your personal healthcare provider before starting or continuing use of creatine during pregnancy. That said, in normal, healthy adult women with no underlying conditions, whatever, it seems that we will benefit from creatine in many of the same ways men do. And as we continue to do the research, it seems that we might also experience extra benefits during pregnancy, for example. Um, and for everyone taking creatine, I feel it's important to say there's very little risk involved. Again, this is one of the most researched supplements on the market. So, as long as you're taking appropriate doses, and for that, again, I recommend consulting your healthcare provider. Basically, at most, it seems that there are those potential stomach upset side effects like nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, whatever. But otherwise, you're at very low risk for any kind of toxicity as long as you're dosing properly. And again, can't emphasize this enough, checking the quality of your product before you buy it and consume it. I have not heard of a lot of people having the stomach upset thing from creatine. My friends who take creatine are not loading. They're just starting at a normal dosage. They're taking like an extra 3 to 5 grams. And none of them have said to me, like, my stomach has been really bothered by this, but it's just like something to keep in mind if you're going to do it. Now, I know you guys are going to ask for product recommendations, so I will share that among my friends who take creatine, I've heard awesome things about Creapture, Creapture. That is the one that's produced in Germany. And also Promix, which that's my friend Devin's company. And this is not an ad for them. I've just heard really good things about it. It seems to be really clean. It's like non-GMO, non-dairy, non-gluten, like all this kind of stuff. And so this is not an official endorsement for either of those products, and you need to do your own research before deciding what to buy. But among my friends who take creatine, those are two very popular ones. So love that for them. And again, I'm going to emphasize again because I just said it about Promix, but it is possible to find gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, even vegan creatine supplements in the market, since powdered creatine supplements are not made from food or animal product. So definitely go check out the options online. Ask your friends for recommendations, do your own research. And as always, hit me in the DMs. I love to chat with you guys if you want to discuss it, or if you have a great one that you love that you feel is really effective for you, let me know. I'll share it, especially if it feels very clean, safe, and effective. Love to hear from you guys about what you're using that you love. That was so fun, guys. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart, as usual, for giving Caps Lock a chance. If you liked this episode, please stick around for more because we have some really exciting topics on the docket. We're going to talk to a sex therapist. We're bringing Lindsay Metzler back on to talk about the relationship and how it changes as you move in together, have kids, like go through life's different phases. We're going to talk about nervous system regulation because a follower heard my burnout episode and messaged me and was like, "Girly Pop, I think your nervous system is dysregulated." And I was like, "Interesting." And then I looked it up and I was like, "Wait, maybe a lot of us have poor nervous system regulation. And how do we fix that?" Anyway, so those are some topics that are coming up. There are going to be way more. Some will be solo episodes and some will feature scientists, founders, experts, doctors, and other very cool, smart people. If there's a topic you want to hear about on Caps Lock, send me a message. I love to give you guys exactly what you want to hear. It is my dream. It is my passion. And lastly, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Life in Caps Lock. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Again, leave us a rating or review. It makes a huge difference. And tune in next Sunday at 8 a.m. for another episode of Caps Lock. Okay. Love you guys. Talk soon. I love you guys. I love you. I'm hungry. I love it. The lighting is so good. The camera is so good. Fame and fortune. Oh my God, she's so cute.